When you hear the name Napoleon, you probably picture the man himself, right? The general, the emperor, the legend. But behind that single figure was something far more powerful, something that truly changed the world, a machine, a completely new kind of war machine that would rewrite the rules of conflict forever.
So that's what we're going to do. We're going to set aside the romance, the politics, all of it. Instead, we're going to pop the hood on this thing and deconstruct the system, piece by terrifying piece, to really understand how it was built and why it was so brutally effective.
We'll break it all down into 5 core parts. First, where did it get its manpower? Then, how was it organized? What was the tech that gave it an edge? How did it handle logistics? And finally, how did all of this come together to create the blueprint for modern total war?
Okay, first things first. The fuel for this machine was people. You see, 18th century armies were professional, but they were pretty small. The French Revolution changed everything. Suddenly, an army wasn't fighting for a king anymore. It was fighting for the nation. And the nation, well, it demanded everything in return. This new radical idea was called the Levée en masse. Just let that number sink in. By September of 1794, the French Republic had 1.5 million men under arms. This wasn't just a big army. It was an army on a scale the world had literally never seen before. It was a human tidal wave, all fueled by this new nationalistic fire.
So how'd they do it? With a radical new law. The Levée en masse wasn't your typical draft. No, this was a total mobilization of the entire country. It basically said that every single citizen and everything the nation owned was now permanently at the service of the army.
And this quote from the actual decree, wow, it shows you just how absolute this was. The young men, they'd fight, but married men had to forge weapons. Women had to make tents and work in hospitals. Even children were put to work making lint from old linen for bandages. The entire nation became one giant engine for war.
So having 1 million soldiers is great, but it also creates a huge problem. How in the world do you command and move that many people effectively? Well, Napoleon's answer was an absolute masterpiece of organization, the Army Corps system, or the Corps d'Armée.
Before this, an army was basically one giant, slow-moving blob. Hard to steer, totally dependent on one guy at the top. The Corps system just shattered that old model. It created these smaller, self-sufficient mini-armies. They could march along different roads, find their own food, and operate totally on their own, before converging like a fist to deliver the knockout blow. And here's how it worked. A single corps, usually led by one of Napoleon's famous marshals, had its own infantry, cavalry, and artillery. It was a perfectly balanced fighting force. It could hold its own in a battle for hours, even a full day, until help arrived. This modular design gave Napoleon a level of strategic flexibility that his enemies just couldn't handle.
But this machine wasn't just about men and organization. It also ran on some seriously superior hardware. There were 2 key pieces of tech that gave the Grande Armée a massive edge, one for firepower and another for information.
First up, let's talk artillery. The Gribeauval system was a total overhaul of French cannons. They standardized everything, from the cannonballs to the wheels on the carriages. This made French artillery lighter, more mobile, way more accurate, and so much easier to repair on the battlefield than anyone else's in Europe. It let Napoleon concentrate overwhelming, devastating firepower exactly where he needed it, when he needed it.
All right, now for the other piece of tech. Think about this. How do you send complex, secret orders to all your different army corps, which are spread out over hundreds of kilometers, and get those orders there faster than the enemy can react? Remember, this is an age way before electricity or radio. It was a massive strategic challenge.
The French answer was the Chappe Optical Telegraph. It was this incredible network of semaphore towers, each one in sight of the next. They could send coded messages across France at a truly mind-boggling speed. A message from Paris to Lille, that's almost 200 kilometers, could get there in less than 10 minutes. This was Napoleon's secret weapon. It was basically a continental nervous system that moved information at the speed of light, or, well, the speed of sight. So we've got the manpower, the organization, and the technology. But there's one last critical piece of the puzzle: the fuel. How do you feed this enormous, fast-moving machine? Well, the answer was as brutal as it was ingenious. The French army practiced something they called la maraude. Now, this wasn't just random, chaotic looting. It was a calculated, organized policy of systematically stripping the countryside of everything the army needed.
Soldiers were just expected to forage for their own food, which really meant taking it from the local population. This led to a pretty grim calculation. By forcing the land itself to feed his army, Napoleon cut his forces loose from the slow, vulnerable supply wagons that tied down his enemies. His war machine basically traded supply security for relentless, overwhelming speed. It could show up where it was least expected, moving faster and farther than any army in history.
So let's put it all together. When you combine national conscription on a massive scale, a revolutionary modular army, superior technology, and a logistical system built for pure speed, you don't just get a better army, you get something entirely new.
What Napoleon and the French Revolution really perfected was a system that integrated every single aspect of a nation into one unified war machine. It mobilized the people, organized them for maximum flexibility, gave them the best tech, and then unleashed them at a pace no one could match. This was the dawn of total war.
Now we all know how the story ends. The machine was finally ground to a halt in the snows of Russia and ultimately defeated at Waterloo. But the principles behind it, mass conscription, modular core, the industrialization of warfare, the total mobilization of a nation, that terrifying blueprint never went away. It became the model for the cataclysmic wars of the centuries that followed. Which leaves us with a pretty chilling question, doesn't it? The machine itself was broken, yeah? But was its design ever really forgotten?